The streets of San Francisco buzzed with life. Tech workers hurried to their offices, clutching overpriced lattes, while tourists snapped selfies against the backdrop of the Golden Gate Bridge. Luxury cars crawled through traffic, their drivers impatiently honking at jaywalkers. Amid this chaos, Ryan Callahan sat in his sleek black Tesla, parked outside his favorite cafe. Ryan was the kind of man who turned heads, not just for his wealth, but for his story. A self-made millionaire, he had climbed out of foster care to build a tech empire worth billions. Yet, as he tapped his fingers rhythmically on the steering wheel, his mind wasn't on his next big deal or the upcoming investor meeting. It was drawn to the scene just outside his window. There she was again, the homeless woman. Ryan had noticed her the week before, sitting on a battered bench near the cafe. Today, she sat in the same spot, wrapped in a threadbare jacket, against the biting wind. Her auburn hair fell in messy tangles around her face, but it was her expression that captured him. Calm yet defiant, as if the city's indifference couldn't touch her. A passerby stopped and hurled an insult. "Get a job, loser." Claire didn't flinch. She looked up, her piercing green eyes locking onto the man. "Maybe I'll take yours," she replied, her tone sharp and unwavering. Ryan watched, intrigued. Most would have looked away, avoided confrontation, or even begged for mercy. Not her. She stood her ground, her voice steady despite the ridicule. When the man stalked off, Ryan found himself stepping out of his car. He wasn't sure why. Curiosity, guilt, or perhaps something deeper. As he approached, Claire's eyes flicked to him, her defenses immediately up. "Here to lecture me too?" she asked, her tone laced with sarcasm. Ryan stopped a few feet away. "No," he said simply. "I just wanted to see if you were okay." Claire snorted. "Rich guy worried about a homeless woman? What's the angle?" "No angle," Ryan replied. "Just curious." "Curiosity killed the cat," she retorted, pulling her jacket tighter. For a moment, Ryan hesitated. He wasn't used to being dismissed, much less spoken to so bluntly. "Do you need anything? Food? A place to stay?" Claire's lips curled into a faint smile, more bitter than amused. "I've gotten this far without anyone's help. Don't need a savior now." Ryan nodded, sensing he wouldn't get far. "Take care of yourself," he said before retreating to his car. But as he drove away, her words echoed in his mind, cutting through the noise of his assistant's phone calls and the city's ceaseless hum. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, scrolling through his laptop. Homelessness statistics filled the screen. Over 500,000 people in the U.S. without homes, 40% of them families, many working full-time jobs, yet unable to afford shelter. The numbers were staggering, but it was Claire's face that haunted him. Her sharp retort, her hollow eyes, her unyielding strength. It wasn't pity he felt. It was something deeper, something unsettling. For all his wealth and success, Ryan had never felt more powerless. And for the first time in years, he wondered if his success meant anything at all. Ryan Callahan found himself back in the same part of the city 2 days later, standing in the crisp morning air, outside the cafe. He wasn't entirely sure why he'd returned. His assistant, Tyler, had left 3 urgent voicemails, reminding him of back-to-back meetings, but Ryan ignored them. His mind was elsewhere. He scanned the area for Claire, the homeless woman who had left a mark on his thoughts. The bench was empty. Disappointment prickled at him, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe he was just tired of the monotony of his perfectly curated life. Ryan turned and headed down the street, weaving through the morning rush. After a few blocks, the aroma of fresh bread and hearty soups led him to a modest building with a peeling sign that read, St. Vincent's Soup Kitchen. Through the open doorway, he glimpsed a line of people holding trays, their faces etched with exhaustion and quiet gratitude. Something about the scene tugged at him, drawing him in. Inside, Ryan spotted her immediately. Claire stood behind the counter, her auburn hair tied back, ladling soup into bowls with practiced efficiency. Her sharp features were set in concentration, but her movements were gentle, almost compassionate. She wasn't eating, she was serving. For a moment, Ryan just watched. She seemed different here, grounded, almost in control. She noticed him before he could step forward. Her green eyes narrowed in suspicion, and she gave a curt nod to the man beside her before walking toward Ryan, her expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" she asked, crossing her arms. Ryan hesitated. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Guess you think all homeless people spend their time begging on street corners," she said, her tone edged with defiance. Surprise. Ryan raised his hands in mock surrender. "Not what I was thinking. I was just curious," she interrupted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Rich guy curiosity. Must be a slow day for you." Ryan chuckled despite himself. "You're not easy to forget, Claire." Her eyes flickered with something, a mix of surprise and wariness. "So, you remembered my name. Hard to forget someone who tells me to walk away." "Then, maybe you should have listened." Before Ryan could respond, a stocky man with a warm smile approached. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his eyes darting between Claire and Ryan. "Fine, Marcus," Claire replied curtly. "He was just leaving." Ryan extended a hand. "Ryan Callahan." Marcus hesitated, then shook it. "Marcus Taylor. I run this place." Ryan nodded toward Claire. "I didn't know she volunteered here." "She's one of our best," Marcus said, a note of pride in his voice. Not that she'd admit it. Claire rolled her eyes. "Are we done?" "I've got work to do." Marcus gave Ryan an apologetic smile. "She's got a way with words, doesn't she?" Ryan smirked. "I've noticed." As Claire walked away, Marcus leaned closer. "She's been through a lot. People like her don't trust easily. If you're here out of curiosity, tread lightly." Ryan nodded, his curiosity deepening. "She mentioned that. What's her story?" Marcus hesitated, then sighed. "That's hers to tell, not mine. But I'll say this, she's stronger than she looks." Later that afternoon, Ryan lingered near the soup kitchen, pretending to check his phone. When Claire emerged, her pace quickened as she spotted him. He fell into step beside her. "Following me now?" she said without looking at him. "I wanted to talk," Ryan said. "About what?" "About why you're so quick to push people away." Claire stopped abruptly, forcing Ryan to halt. "Look, whatever guilt or charity thing you've got going on, save it. Your world and mine don't mix. Walk away while you still can." Ryan frowned. "Why do you assume I don't actually care?" "Because you don't know me," Claire snapped. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything and have people stare at you like you're trash. You don't know what it's like to fight for every damn breath." Her words hit harder than Ryan expected. He took a step back, his tone softening. "You're right. I don't know what it's like, but I'd like to." Claire stared at him for a long moment, her defenses wavering. But before she could reply, her knees buckled. Ryan lunged forward, catching her just before she hit the ground. The hospital was cold and sterile, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. Ryan sat in a plastic chair outside the emergency room, his phone buzzing incessantly with work emails. He ignored them all. A doctor emerged, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Callahan?" Ryan stood quickly. "How is she?" "She's malnourished and dehydrated," the doctor said, but she'll be okay with some rest and proper care. Ryan exhaled in relief. Can I see her? The doctor nodded, leading him to a small room where Claire lay pale and frail, hooked up to an IV. Her eyes fluttered open as Ryan approached. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice weak. Making sure you're okay, Ryan said, pulling up a chair beside her bed. Claire scoffed. I told you, I don't need saving. And I'm not trying to save you, Ryan replied firmly. But I'm not walking away either. Her gaze softened for a brief moment before her usual sarcasm returned. You're persistent. I'll give you that. It's a flaw, Ryan said with a small smile. Get used to it. The next morning, Ryan offered to take Claire back to his penthouse to recover. She refused outright. I'm not your charity project, she said, crossing her arms. It's not charity, Ryan insisted. It's a quiet place to rest. That's all. Why do you care so much? Claire asked, her voice edged with skepticism. Ryan hesitated before answering. Because I know what it's like to feel invisible. Claire's eyes searched his face, looking for insincerity, but finding none. Finally, she sighed. Fine, but just until I'm back on my feet. Ryan smiled, sensing he'd won a small victory. Deal. As they left the hospital together, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about her anymore. For the first time in years, she felt the smallest flicker of hope. The elevator hummed softly as it ascended to the top floor of Ryan Callahan's penthouse. Claire stood at the back, clutching her bag tightly, her expression a mix of exhaustion and defiance. She wasn't sure what felt stranger, the sterile hospital bed she'd just left behind, or the idea of stepping into the lavish world of a man she barely knew. Ryan glanced at her, out of the corner of his eye, trying to gauge her mood. You okay? Claire shot him a sharp look. Do I look okay? He didn't answer, letting the silence settle between them. When the elevator doors opened, Claire was met with a sight that made her freeze. The penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering San Francisco skyline, and every inch of the space radiated modern luxury. Polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of strategically placed lighting, while sleek furniture seemed to belong more in a magazine than in someone's home. Claire took a hesitant step forward. This is a lot. Ryan smiled faintly. It's just a place to live. For someone who doesn't need 100-foot view of the city, sure, Claire muttered, her sarcasm shielding her unease. Ryan showed her to the guest bedroom, which was larger than any space Claire had called home in years. The bed looked impossibly soft, the kind you could sink into and forget the world existed. Claire set her bag down, her fingers brushing against the crisp white duvet. Make yourself at home, Ryan said from the doorway. If you need anything, food, clothes, whatever, just let me know. She turned to face him, her walls firmly in place. This isn't a permanent thing. I don't plan on staying long. Ryan nodded, his expression calm. I know. But while you're here, you should rest. Rest. The word felt foreign, almost laughable. Claire couldn't remember the last time she'd truly rested, when survival wasn't clawing at her every waking moment. She nodded curtly, unwilling to reveal the vulnerability threatening to surface. Over the next few days, Claire stayed mostly in her room, venturing out only when she was sure Ryan was busy. She'd seen his office, a glass-walled space filled with the hum of technology and the quiet intensity of someone juggling the weight of an empire. He was always on the phone, his voice steady and commanding, discussing deals worth millions. Claire couldn't help but feel out of place. While he navigated the high-stakes world of tech, she spent her time pacing, staring out the window, or reluctantly eating the meals Ryan left for her in the kitchen. One evening, Ryan found her in the living room, absently flipping through a book. He cleared his throat, making her look up. "You've barely said a word to me since you got here," he said, leaning against the doorway. "I didn't realize small talk was part of the deal," Claire replied, her tone sharp. Ryan smirked. "It's not. But you're not exactly a ghost. You're allowed to exist here." Claire set the book down and folded her arms. "This isn't my world, Ryan. It never will be." "Why not?" She hesitated, her defenses wavering. "Because this," she gestured to the penthouse, "isn't real. It's a bubble. Out there." Her voice trailed off, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Ryan stepped closer. "Out there is broken, but it doesn't mean you have to stay in it." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You can't just fix people, Ryan?" "Maybe not," he admitted, "but it doesn't mean I won't try." The next morning, Ryan's assistant, Tyler, arrived with a stack of documents for him to review. Tyler, a sharp-dressed man with a no-nonsense demeanor, gave Claire a once-over when he saw her sitting at the kitchen counter. "Didn't know we were running a charity now," Tyler said, under his breath, loud enough for Ryan to hear. Ryan's jaw tightened. "That's enough, Tyler." Claire stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "He's not wrong." "Claire," Ryan started, but she shook her head. "I'll stay out of your way," she said, retreating to her room. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "You're getting too involved, Ryan. This doesn't end well." Ryan ignored him, though Tyler's words lingered. Later that day, while tidying up the guest room, Ryan noticed a crumpled envelope sticking out of Claire's bag. The name Claire Whitaker was scrawled in familiar handwriting. He hesitated, then gently placed the envelope back, his curiosity gnawing at him. Who had written to her? And why did she keep it hidden? That evening, Ryan found Claire on the penthouse balcony, staring out at the city lights. She didn't look at him as he joined her. "You said your world and mine don't mix," he began, his tone even. "But that doesn't mean you have to shut everyone out." Claire sighed, her breath visible in the cool night air. "You don't get it." "Then explain it to me." For a long moment she said nothing. Then quietly, she began to speak. She told him about the betrayal that had ripped her life apart, about the nights she spent on the streets, wondering if she'd make it to morning. Her voice was steady, but Ryan could hear the cracks beneath the surface. "Every time someone offered help," she said, "it came with strings attached. They wanted something in return. I learned the hard way not to trust anyone." Ryan's chest tightened. "Not everyone's like that, Claire." She finally turned to face him, her green eyes searching his. "Prove it." Ryan wasn't sure what he could do to earn Claire's trust, but he knew he couldn't walk away now. The next day, he made a call to Marcus at the soup kitchen. "Tell me everything you can about Claire," Ryan said. Marcus hesitated. "I told you before. Her story isn't mine to tell." "I'm not looking to exploit her," Ryan said firmly. "I just want to help." After a long pause, Marcus relented. "She had a restaurant once, a good one, but someone close to her screwed her over. She lost everything." The revelation hit Ryan harder than he expected. Claire wasn't just surviving. She'd been thriving once, and someone had taken it all away. He couldn't shake the thought as he hung up the phone. Later that evening, Ryan approached Claire with a tentative smile. "I've been thinking about something." "Should I be worried?" Claire replied, her tone dry. "Not this time," he said. "You're a fighter, Claire. But even fighters need help sometimes." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you getting at?" "I don't want to just give you a place to stay," he said. "I want to help you rebuild. Whatever you lost, your restaurant, your life, I want to help you get it back. Claire stared at him, her expression unreadable. Why do you care so much? Because I've been where you are, Ryan said simply, and someone helped me. Before Claire could respond, the doorbell rang. Ryan opened it to find a courier holding a package. He signed for it and brought it inside, setting it on the counter. As Claire watched, he opened the package to reveal a folder filled with legal documents. On top was a familiar name, Greg Thornton. Claire's blood ran cold. Where did you get that? Ryan looked at her, his expression serious. It was sent to me anonymously. Who is Greg Thornton? Claire's face paled as she backed away. He's the reason I lost everything. The sun cast long shadows across the gleaming glass walls of Ryan Callahan's penthouse, the soft light highlighting every sleek surface and polished edge. Claire sat on the edge of the plush guest bed, the folder Ryan had opened the night before, lying unopened on her lap. The name Greg Thornton stared back at her like a ghost from her past. She hadn't spoken much since Ryan confronted her with the documents. Now, as she traced the edges of the folder with trembling fingers, the memories clawed their way back. Out in the kitchen, Ryan poured himself a cup of coffee, his mind racing. He knew he'd pushed Claire into a corner, but he couldn't ignore what the documents represented. Someone had gone to great lengths to send him those files, and from Claire's reaction, it was clear this wasn't just a random piece of her past. It was the piece. Good morning. Claire's voice startled him. Ryan turned to see her standing in the doorway, her posture stiff. She looked as though she hadn't slept, her usual defiance replaced by something more fragile. Morning, he said carefully. You hungry? She shook her head. We need to talk. Ryan gestured toward the living room, where they sat opposite each other, the folder resting on the coffee table like an unspoken challenge. Claire leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Greg Thornton, she began, her voice steady despite the tension in her jaw, was my business partner and my fiancé. Ryan's brow furrowed. Fiancé? Claire nodded, her gaze distant. I met him when I was opening my first restaurant. He was charming, ambitious. He believed in me, or at least I thought he did. She took a shaky breath, her fingers tightening. We built the restaurant together, but the closer we got to success, the more I started noticing things, missing funds, unexplained expenses. When I confronted him, he made me feel like I was the problem. And then, her voice broke. Ryan leaned forward, his tone gentle. And then what? He emptied our accounts and disappeared, Claire said, her voice laced with bitterness. The debt he left behind was in my name. I lost everything. Ryan sat back, his hands clasped together. Why didn't you tell me this before? Claire's eyes flashed with anger. Because it's not your problem, Ryan. None of this is. That's where you're wrong, he said firmly. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Claire stood abruptly, crossing the room to stare out at the city below. You don't get it. I've fought tooth and nail to survive since then. Depending on someone else, it's a weakness I can't afford. Ryan joined her, standing just behind her. It's no one easy to let someone help you. And if Greg is still out there, he doesn't get to keep winning. Claire turned to him, her walls crumbling just slightly. You don't know what you're getting into. Then tell me, Ryan said, his voice steady. Let me help you fight this. As the day stretched on, Claire's presence in the penthouse began to stir whispers. Tyler, ever the pragmatic assistant, wasn't subtle when he pulled Ryan aside during a lunch meeting. This isn't good for optics, Tyler said, lowering his voice as they stood in the penthouse's expansive kitchen. The board is already skeptical about your focus. Now, you've got a... Guest. Ryan glared at him. She's not just a guest, and what happens in my home is none of their business. Tyler raised an eyebrow. You're playing with fire, Ryan. If this gets out, the media won't just come for her. They'll come for you too. I'm not abandoning her, Ryan said firmly. Not now. Meanwhile, Claire struggled to navigate her temporary stay in Ryan's world. The penthouse, with its pristine surfaces and extravagant touches, felt like a constant reminder of the chasm between them. One afternoon, while Ryan was in a meeting, she wandered into the main living area. The bookshelves caught her eye first. They were filled with leather-bound volumes, their spines gleaming in the sunlight. She reached out to trace the title of one, The Art of War, before pulling back, as if touching it might shatter the illusion of control she clung to. Her exploration led her to Ryan's office, where the walls were lined with framed photos and awards. One photo in particular caught her attention. A younger Ryan, standing in front of a modest foster home, a proud but weary expression on his face. Guess I'm not the only one running from the past, she murmured. That evening, as Claire tried to settle into the unfamiliar comfort of the penthouse, the doorbell rang. Ryan answered to find his mother, Evelyn Callahan, standing there, her designer coat pristine, despite the chilly evening air. Mother, Ryan said, his tone wary. Evelyn swept past him into the penthouse, her sharp gaze immediately landing on Claire, who stood awkwardly near the couch. And who is this? Evelyn asked, her voice cool. Claire stepped forward, her chin lifted. Claire. Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. I see. Ryan closed the door, his patience thinning. What do you want, Mother? I came to talk some sense into you, Evelyn said, her tone sharp. The board is worried. Your reputation is everything, Ryan. And this, she gestured toward Claire, isn't exactly helping. Claire's face flushed, but she held her ground. You don't know anything about me. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. And what should I know? That you're taking advantage of my son's generosity. That's enough, Ryan snapped, stepping between them. Claire isn't going anywhere, and I don't need your approval. Evelyn's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Ryan. Then, it's mine to make, he said firmly. After Evelyn left, Ryan found Claire sitting on the balcony, her arms wrapped around her knees. He approached cautiously, sitting beside her. I'm sorry about that, he said softly. Claire shook her head. You don't have to keep defending me, Ryan. Maybe she's right. She's not, Ryan said firmly. You're not a mistake, Claire. You're the first thing that's felt right in a long time. Claire's eyes filled with unshed tears, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The morning sun filtered through the tall glass windows of Ryan Callahan's penthouse, casting a soft glow over the sleek furniture. Ryan was seated at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone while sipping coffee. The serenity of the moment shattered when his assistant, Tyler, barged in, his face pale and strained. We have a problem, Tyler announced, dropping a stack of tabloids onto the counter. Ryan frowned, picking up the top magazine. Splashed across the front page was a grainy photograph of him and Claire outside the hospital. The headline screamed, Millionaire's Mystery Woman, from park bench to penthouse. What the? Ryan began, but Tyler cut him off. It's everywhere, Tyler said, pulling out his tablet. Social media's on fire. Half the internet thinks you're some bleeding heart philanthropist, and the other half thinks she's a gold digger. Ryan's jaw tightened as he scrolled through the digital comments. Words like scandal, affair, and mistress jumped out at him. Claire appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing at the scene. "What's going on?" Ryan hesitated, but Tyler didn't. "You've gone viral." Claire snatched one of the tabloids, her face blanching as she read. "I can't believe this." The day spiraled into chaos. By noon, the media frenzy had reached every corner of Ryan's life. Reporters camped outside the penthouse, their cameras ready to capture any glimpse of Claire. Ryan's company board demanded an emergency meeting, concerned about the potential damage to their public image. "Optics matter," said one board member during the video call. "This relationship is becoming a liability." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his expression icy. "She's not a liability. And I won't abandon someone because of gossip." Another board member spoke up. "This isn't just about you, Ryan. The company's reputation is at stake." Ryan's voice dropped, dangerously calm. "Then, maybe our reputation needs to change." While Ryan faced corporate backlash, Claire dealt with the brunt of public judgment. Paparazzi followed her whenever she stepped outside, their cameras flashing as they shouted invasive questions. "Claire, are you using Ryan for his money? Did you fake being homeless to get into his life?" One particularly brutal article labeled her a Cinderella story gone wrong, accompanied by photos of her looking exhausted as she entered the soup kitchen. Inside, Marcus, the soup kitchen manager, shook his head as he showed her the article. "These people have no idea who you really are." Claire laughed bitterly. "Do they care?" "You can't let them win," Marcus said firmly. "You've come too far to let this break you." As if the tabloids weren't enough, Ryan's mother, Evelyn, made another unannounced visit. This time, her demeanor was sharper, her words cutting. "Ryan, this needs to stop," Evelyn said, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "The world is watching, and they're not kind." "I don't care what they think," Ryan replied, his tone clipped. Evelyn turned to Claire, her gaze icy. "You may not care, but he should. Ryan has worked his entire life to build this empire, and I won't stand by while it's torn down." Claire straightened, meeting Evelyn's glare. "I didn't ask for any of this." "Maybe not," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with disdain. "But you're here now, and your presence is costing him everything." Before Ryan could respond, Claire walked out of the room, her head held high, despite the tears threatening to spill. That evening, Ryan sat in his office, staring at his phone. His social media feed was flooded with speculation, accusations, and memes, mocking both him and Claire. Anger bubbled within him, but so did a sense of purpose. He opened his laptop and began typing. An hour later, he hit publish, his words accompanied by a candid photo of Claire sketching on the penthouse balcony. "This is Claire. She's not a story or a scandal. She's a person who has faced unimaginable challenges with grace and strength. If standing by her cost me my reputation, so be it. Some things are worth more than public approval." Ryan's post went viral within minutes. Support poured in from some quarters, while others doubled down on their criticism. News outlets picked up the story, dissecting every word. Overnight, the narrative began to shift. "She's an artist?" one headline questioned. Another read, "Callahan defends mystery woman. A modern-day love story or PR stunt." Meanwhile, Claire remained skeptical of Ryan's decision to go public. "You didn't have to do that," she said, as they sat on the couch that night. "Yes, I did," Ryan replied, his tone firm. "You deserve better than what they're saying about you." In the midst of the media storm, Marcus organized a small rally outside the soup kitchen, inviting people from the community who knew Claire to share their stories. "She's not what they say," Marcus declared to the small crowd of supporters and reporters. Claire has spent years helping others, even when she had nothing herself. One by one, people stepped forward to speak. A young mother tearfully shared how Claire had helped her find shelter. An elderly man recounted how she'd given him her own coat on a freezing night. The event was live-streamed, and within hours, it gained traction online. For the first time, public opinion began to swing in Claire's favor. Ryan's bold stance and the community's rally caught the attention of a prominent journalist, Amanda Wells. She reached out to Ryan, requesting an exclusive interview. "Why do this?" Amanda asked during their sit-down. "You could have distanced yourself from Claire and saved your reputation." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Because Claire is worth it, and because the narrative needs to change. People like her are written off too easily." The interview aired on national television, painting a more humanized picture of both Ryan and Claire. It didn't silence the critics entirely, but it created a ripple effect, inspiring others to share stories of resilience and hope. By the end of the week, the media storm had calmed slightly, but its effects lingered. Claire remained wary of the public eye, her movements more cautious. Ryan, however, was unrelenting in his support. "We'll get through this," he promised one night, as they sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below. Claire sighed, leaning into him. "I want to believe that." "You can," Ryan said, his arm tightening around her. "Because we're not backing down." The morning air in San Francisco was crisp and filled with the soft hum of the city waking up. Claire sat by the penthouse window, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea. The horizon was painted in hues of orange and pink, but her mind was elsewhere, lost in memories she had worked so hard to suppress. Across the room, Ryan paced back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. His conversations were sharp and clipped, his frustration evident as he dealt with lingering fallout from the media storm. Claire glanced at him, guilt tugging at her heart. "You don't have to fight everyone for me," she said softly when he hung up. Ryan turned to her, his expression softening. "I'm not fighting for you, Claire. I'm fighting with you." She smiled faintly, but before she could reply, Ryan's assistant, Tyler, walked in, holding a manila folder. His face was serious, almost grim. "We found something," Tyler said, handing the folder to Ryan. "It's about Claire's past." Ryan opened the folder cautiously, his eyes scanning the documents. Bank statements, emails, and legal contracts filled the pages. Claire leaned over, her curiosity piqued. But as she read, her face drained of color. This can't be real," she whispered, her voice trembling. The documents revealed a damning truth. Greg Thornton, her former business partner and fiancé, had not only betrayed her, but had committed fraud, embezzling funds from their shared restaurant venture. He had funneled money into offshore accounts, leaving Claire to bear the financial and legal fallout when the restaurant collapsed. Ryan's jaw tightened. "This is enough to reopen the case against him." Claire shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. I can't go through this again." Ryan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone this time." Despite Claire's hesitation, Ryan convinced her to confront her past. They traveled to her hometown in Oregon, a small, picturesque town nestled in the shadow of the Cascade Mountains. As they drove through the winding roads, memories flooded Claire's mind, both sweet and bitter. Their first stop was the remains of her once thriving restaurant, Harvest Table. The building stood abandoned, its windows boarded up, and its once vibrant sign faded and cracked. Claire stepped out of the car, her chest tightening as she approached the building. She ran her fingers over the weathered wood of the front door, her mind flashing back to the bustling kitchen, the laughter of her staff, and the pride she felt as customers filled the dining room. "It was beautiful," she said quietly. Ryan stood beside her, his gaze steady. "It still can be." Later, they met with Marcus, the soup kitchen manager, who had connections in the town. He introduced them to a private investigator, Julia Marlowe, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a knack for uncovering secrets. Julia wasted no time diving into the case. "Greg Thornton didn't just ruin your business," she said, her voice firm. "He's been exploiting people for years." As Julia laid out her findings, Claire felt a mixture of anger and determination. Greg's network of deceit was vast, involving not just financial fraud, but also connections to powerful figures who had shielded him from accountability. "Why hasn't he been stopped?" Claire asked, her voice shaking. Julia leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. "Because people like him know how to manipulate the system. But with your testimony and this new evidence, we have a chance." As Claire grappled with the decision to testify, Ryan faced pressure from his company. The board was growing restless, warning him that his involvement in the case could damage their reputation further. "You're putting everything at risk for her," one board member said during a tense meeting. Ryan's response was unwavering. "If standing by Claire is a risk, then it's one I'm willing to take." Meanwhile, Claire reconnected with a former employee, Emily, who had been a chef at Harvest Table. Emily was now running a small catering business, scraping by after losing her job when the restaurant closed. "I thought you abandoned us," Emily admitted when they met. "But now I see you were a victim too." The reunion was emotional, and it reignited Claire's resolve. "I'm going to make this right," she promised. One evening, as Claire and Ryan walked back to their hotel, a shadowy figure approached them in the dimly lit parking lot. The man handed Claire an envelope and disappeared into the night. Inside was a single note: "Drop the case, or you'll regret it." Ryan's protective instincts flared. "We need to call the police." Claire shook her head, her hands trembling. "This is what Greg does. He intimidates people into silence." "Not this time," Ryan said firmly. "We're not backing down." Word of Claire's fight against Greg spread through the town. Former employees, customers, and even local business owners rallied around her, sharing their own stories of how the restaurant had once brought the community together. A small rally was held outside the old restaurant, where Claire addressed the crowd. "I let fear and shame silence me for too long," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. "But not anymore. Together, we can rebuild what was lost." The crowd erupted into applause, their support fueling Claire's determination. With Julia's help, Claire and Ryan gathered enough evidence to confront Greg directly. They arranged a meeting in a neutral location, a sleek, modern law office in downtown Portland. Greg arrived with his usual smug demeanor, his expensive suit, and confident smile, masking the predator beneath. But as Claire and Ryan presented their evidence, his arrogance began to crack. "You think you can win this?" Greg sneered. "I have connections you can't even imagine." Claire leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "Maybe, but I have something you don't. Truth." As they left the meeting, Claire felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she felt in control of her narrative. Ryan squeezed her hand as they walked to the car. "You were incredible in there." Claire smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you." Back in San Francisco, Ryan's assistant Tyler received an anonymous email containing a veiled threat. It was clear that Greg wasn't done fighting, but Ryan and Claire were ready. Together, they had faced the media, public judgment, and the ghosts of the past. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they weren't alone. "Whatever comes next," Ryan said one evening, as they sat on the penthouse balcony, "we'll face it together." Claire nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. Together, the glittering chandeliers of San Francisco's most exclusive ballroom cast a warm glow over the assembled elite. Tonight's charity gala, hosted by Callahan Enterprises, was the social event of the season, a gathering of power, wealth, and influence. Yet for Claire, the glamour of the evening felt like a gilded cage. She stood near the edge of the room, her hands clasping a glass of sparkling water. The designer gown Ryan had bought for her clung perfectly to her frame, but the weight of the judgmental stares around her was heavier than the silk she wore. Whispers followed her every move, each one slicing into her composure like a blade. Ryan approached, his sharp tuxedo cutting a striking figure among the crowd. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low enough for only her to hear. Claire forced a small smile. "I'm fine." He tilted his head, unconvinced. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," she replied firmly. "If I'm going to fight for my future, I can't hide from the world." Ryan smiled, a mix of pride and concern in his eyes. "That's my girl." As they walked toward the main hall, Lauren Hayes, a rival CEO with a penchant for stirring trouble, intercepted them. Her bright smile masked the sharpness of her words. "Ryan, so good to see you," Lauren cooed, before her gaze slid to Claire. "And you must be the infamous Claire." Claire stiffened, but held her ground. "Infamous? I wasn't aware I'd reached that level of notoriety." Lauren's smile widened, predatory and condescending. "Oh, don't be modest. Everyone's talking about you. It's not every day someone like you ascends to these heights." "Someone like me?" Claire echoed, her voice cool but steady. Lauren leaned in slightly, her tone dripping with faux sympathy. "You know, someone with a colorful past." Ryan stepped in, his jaw tight. "Lauren, if you'll excuse us." "No need to rush off," Lauren said, her tone laced with mock sweetness. "I was just about to commend Claire for her bravery. It must take so much courage to face all this scrutiny." Claire's hands tightened around her glass, but she didn't waver. "Courage is facing people who underestimate you and proving them wrong." Lauren's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing before she excused herself. Ryan placed a comforting hand on Claire's back. "You handled that perfectly." "Did I?" Claire asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Because I feel like I just walked into a lion's den." As the evening unfolded, Ryan prepared to give his keynote speech. Claire stood off to the side, watching him with admiration. Despite the pressures of his position and the scrutiny he faced because of their relationship, he remained unwavering. Ryan took the stage, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "Tonight, we gather not just to celebrate success, but to remind ourselves of the responsibility that comes with it. Wealth and power mean nothing if they aren't used to lift others." His words resonated deeply, drawing applause from the audience. Yet Claire couldn't shake the feeling that not everyone in the room shared his vision. As the evening progressed, Claire found herself cornered by a group of socialites. Their laughter was light, but their words were razor-sharp. "So, Claire," one woman began, her tone dripping with faux curiosity, "what's it like transitioning from your previous lifestyle to this?" Another chimed in, her smile too wide. "It must be overwhelming, right? All these high-profile events and people." Claire clenched her jaw, her heart pounding. "It's an adjustment, but I'm not defined by where I came from." "Of course not," the first woman said, her tone insincere. But it must be so. Inspiring for you to be here. Before Claire could respond, Ryan appeared at her side, his presence commanding. Is there a problem here? The women stammered, their bravado faltering under Ryan's sharp gaze. Oh no, we were just chatting. Well, it sounded like something else, Ryan said, his tone firm. Claire is my partner, and I won't tolerate anyone treating her with anything less than respect. The women quickly excused themselves, leaving Claire and Ryan alone. You didn't have to do that, Claire said softly. Yes, I did, Ryan replied, his voice gentle. You deserve better. As the night drew to a close, the event's host invited Claire to the stage. She hesitated, her heart racing as she glanced at Ryan. You've got this, he said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Claire stepped onto the stage, the room quieting as all eyes turned to her. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the microphone. I didn't grow up in a world like this, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. I've made mistakes, and I've faced more challenges than I ever imagined. But those challenges don't define me. What defines us is how we rise after falling. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. I'm here tonight because someone saw my potential when I couldn't see it myself. And now, I want to do the same for others. We all have the power to make a difference, to create opportunities for those who need them most. Let's not waste that power. The room erupted into applause, the sound overwhelming. Claire stepped off the stage, her heart pounding, as she returned to Ryan's side. You were amazing, he whispered. Was I? She asked, her voice shaky. You were, he said firmly. And you just silenced every critic in this room. Later that evening, as they returned to the penthouse, Claire found an envelope waiting for her on the doorstep. Inside was a single note. Stay out of the past, or there will be consequences. Ryan's expression darkened as he read the note. Greg. Claire nodded, her fear evident. He's trying to scare me. Ryan pulled her into a protective embrace. He's not going to win. We'll fight him together. Despite the challenges, Claire felt a newfound strength. She was no longer the woman who had fled from her past. She was ready to face it head on. With Ryan by her side, she knew she could withstand whatever came next. Whatever happens, Ryan said one night, as they sat on the penthouse balcony. We're in this together. Claire smiled, her resolve stronger than ever. Together, the first rays of morning sunlight broke through the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long golden shadows across the marble floors. Claire sat at the kitchen island, a mug of tea cradled in her hands, her eyes distant as she gazed at the skyline. Ryan entered, his tie slightly askew, signaling a rare lapse in his otherwise meticulous morning routine. You're up early, he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Claire nodded, her voice soft. I couldn't sleep. That note. It's still in my head. Ryan set his mug down and placed a comforting hand on hers. I talked to Julia last night. She's already looking into Greg's movements. We're not letting him intimidate us. Claire's lips curved into a faint smile. I know, but this fight, it's not just about Greg anymore. It's about proving to myself that I can rebuild what he took from me. Later that day, Claire and Ryan visited a vacant building in the heart of San Francisco. The space had once been a thriving restaurant, but now sat empty, its windows dusty and its walls scrawled with graffiti. Claire stepped inside, her breath catching, as memories of her old restaurant, the Harvest Table, flooded her mind. This could work, she said, running her fingers over the worn countertop. Ryan studied her face. You really want to do this, don't you? Claire turned to him, her eyes alight with determination. I don't just want to rebuild my restaurant. I want it to be a place that gives back, a community hub where people can gather, learn, and grow. Ryan smiled, his admiration evident. Then we'll make it happen. Rebuilding the restaurant was no small task, and Claire knew she couldn't do it alone. She reached out to Marcus, the soup kitchen manager, who had supported her during her darkest days. When she shared her vision with him, his eyes lit up. A restaurant that doubles as a community space? Count me in, Marcus said. But we'll need more hands. Claire nodded. I'm thinking of hiring staff from the community, people who need a second chance, just like I did. Marcus clapped her on the back. You're going to change lives, Claire. Ryan also brought his resources to the table, connecting Claire with contractors, designers, and investors willing to support the project. Yet not everyone was on board. His company's board members, already wary of his relationship with Claire, were quick to voice their concerns. This project is a distraction, one member argued during a heated meeting. We're a tech firm, not a charity. Ryan's tone was sharp as he replied, We're more than a tech firm. If we can't use our success to make a difference, then what's the point? As progress on the restaurant accelerated, Greg Thornton's shadow loomed large. Julia Marlowe, the private investigator, uncovered disturbing evidence that Greg had been surveilling Claire. Photos of her entering the vacant restaurant, meeting with potential staff, and even spending time with Ryan appeared in her report. He's trying to scare her, Julia said during a late-night call with Ryan. But he's also sloppy. I've found leads that could tie him to several fraudulent deals. Ryan's jaw tightened. Keep digging. The more we have on him, the better. Claire, meanwhile, refused to let Greg's threats derail her. She spent her days immersed in the restaurant's renovation, working alongside the staff and contractors. Slowly but surely, the space began to transform into her vision. A warm, welcoming environment filled with light, art, and hope. The restaurant, now renamed Haven, opened its doors on a crisp Saturday evening. A line of guests stretched down the block, drawn by the buzz surrounding Claire's story and the promise of a unique dining experience. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Strings of fairy lights cast a soft glow over reclaimed wood tables, adorned with simple yet elegant centerpieces. Marcus manned the kitchen, his booming laugh cutting through the clatter of pots and pans as the staff worked seamlessly. Claire floated through the space, greeting guests and ensuring everything ran smoothly. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of belonging and purpose. As the evening unfolded, a fire alarm suddenly blared, sending patrons into a panic. Smoke billowed from the kitchen, and the staff rushed to evacuate the building. Claire's heart raced as she guided guests toward the exits, her mind flashing back to the fire that had destroyed her first restaurant. Ryan arrived moments later, his face pale, as he scanned the crowd for Claire. When he found her, she was coughing but unharmed. It's under control, a firefighter assured them. But this wasn't an accident. Someone tampered with the gas line. Claire's knees buckled, and Ryan caught her. It's him, she whispered. It has to be Greg. Despite the setback, Claire refused to let the incident defeat her. We'll rebuild, she said the next morning as she surveyed the damage. This isn't going to stop me. Ryan took her hand. We'll rebuild together. Word of the fire spread quickly, and the community rallied around Claire. Volunteers showed up to help clean and repair the damage, and donations poured in to support the restaurant's reopening. Even Ryan's estranged brother, Michael, surprised everyone by offering his expertise as a contractor. I heard about what happened, Michael said, his voice gruff but sincere. I'm here if you need me. As the repairs progressed, Julia uncovered more evidence against Greg, including financial records that tied him to the fraudulent sale of Claire's first restaurant. But Greg wasn't backing down. An anonymous letter arrived at Haven one evening, warning Claire to stay out of things she didn't understand. Ryan's protective instincts kicked into overdrive. He's escalating, he said. We need to be ready. Claire met his gaze, her determination unwavering. I've been running from Greg for too long. It's time to end this. In the weeks leading up to Haven's reopening, Claire found solace in the support of her growing community. Her staff, once strangers, had become a family. Marcus, Michael, and even Ryan's assistant Tyler had proven themselves to be steadfast allies. One evening, as she stood in the nearly finished restaurant, Claire allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The journey had been grueling, but she had found her purpose again. And for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As Claire prepared to leave for the night, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The text read, "You've made a mistake. Back off, or you'll regret it." Her blood ran cold, but instead of fear, she felt a surge of resolve. She turned to Ryan, who stood waiting by the door. "We need to take this fight to him," she said. Ryan nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Let's finish this." The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting San Francisco's skyline in shades of amber and rose. Claire sat in the nearly restored Haven, its polished wood floors gleaming under the soft glow of newly installed pendant lights. She ran her fingers along the counter, her thoughts heavy with the weight of the text she'd received the night before. Ryan entered, a folder tucked under his arm. His expression was a mixture of concern and determination. "Julia's findings just came in," he said, setting the folder on the counter. Claire looked up, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. What did she find? Ryan slid the folder toward her. "Enough to tie Greg not only to the fraudulent sale of your restaurant, but also to a series of similar schemes across the state. He's been preying on vulnerable businesses for years." Claire opened the folder, her eyes scanning the pages of evidence. Financial records, emails, and even a photo of Greg shaking hands with Lauren Hayes, one of Ryan's past business rivals. Her stomach churned. "Lauren Hayes," Claire murmured. "What's her connection to all this?" Ryan leaned against the counter, his jaw tight. "She's been working with Greg to launder money through their fake acquisitions. Julia thinks this goes deeper than we initially thought." Determined to expose Greg, Claire and Ryan met with Julia Marlowe in a dimly lit office downtown. The private investigators spread out a series of documents and photographs on the table. "This is bigger than just Greg," Julia said, pointing to a web of connections that linked him to high-profile individuals in the business world. "He's part of a network that's been exploiting small businesses for decades." Claire's eyes narrowed as she studied the evidence. "So, how do we bring him down?" Julia tapped a photo of Greg at a charity gala. "He's careful, but he's arrogant. He keeps records because he doesn't think anyone can touch him. If we can get into his private files, we'll have everything we need." Ryan's brow furrowed. "Breaking into his office isn't exactly legal," Julia smirked. "It's not breaking in if we have someone on the inside." As the plan began to take shape, Claire received an unexpected visitor at Haven. Her sister, Emily, stood at the door, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and longing. It had been years since they'd spoken, their relationship fractured by the fallout of Claire's failed restaurant and Emily's refusal to take her side. "Claire," Emily said, her voice trembling, "I heard about Haven. I just I wanted to see you. Claire's initial instinct was to shut the door, but something in Emily's expression gave her pause. She stepped aside, allowing her sister to enter. The two sat at a small table near the window, the silence between them heavy. Finally, Emily spoke. I'm sorry for everything. I should have been there for you. Claire's voice was cold, but her words carried the weight of years of hurt. You didn't just abandon me, Emily. You sided with Greg. You believed him over your own sister. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I was wrong. I see that now. I want to make it right. Claire studied her sister, searching for any sign of deceit. If you're serious about making it right, you'll help us take Greg down. Emily's unexpected arrival proved to be a turning point. As Greg's former fiancée, she still had access to key information about his operations. Under Julia's guidance, Emily agreed to plant a listening device in Greg's office during an upcoming meeting. It's risky, Julia warned during a late-night planning session. But if we can get him talking, we'll have the proof we need. Ryan was hesitant. Are we sure we can trust her? Claire hesitated before replying. I don't know. But if she's willing to help, we have to take the chance. The night of the meeting, Claire and Ryan waited anxiously in a parked car outside Greg's office building. Julia monitored the audio feed from a nearby van, her fingers flying over a keyboard as she adjusted the equipment. Inside, Emily played her part perfectly, engaging Greg in casual conversation while subtly steering the discussion toward his business dealings. You've always been good at this, Emily said, her tone light but probing. Finding opportunities where others see dead ends. Greg chuckled, his arrogance palpable. It's not about finding opportunities, Emily. It's about creating them. People like Claire. They're too naive to see the bigger picture. Claire's fists clenched as she listened to the feed, but Ryan placed a calming hand on her shoulder. We'll get him, he said softly. The tension in the van was palpable as Julia whispered into her headset, guiding Emily through the conversation. But Greg's tone suddenly shifted. You've been asking a lot of questions, he said, suspicion creeping into his voice. What's this really about? Emily hesitated, and the room fell silent. Claire held her breath as the audio feed crackled. I miss working with you, Emily said finally, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. I miss feeling like I was part of something important. Greg seemed to relax, and the conversation continued, but it was clear the window of opportunity was closing. Julia signaled for Emily to end the meeting, and moments later, she emerged from the building, her face pale but triumphant. I got it, she said, handing Julia the listening device. Everything he said. It's all there. Back at Julia's office, the team combed through the audio recordings, piecing together a damning case against Greg and his network. They uncovered evidence of fraudulent contracts, embezzlement, and even connections to Lauren Hayes' shady real estate deals. This is enough to bury him, Julia said, leaning back in her chair. Claire felt a surge of relief, but it was tempered by the knowledge that Greg wouldn't go down without a fight. What's our next move? Ryan's expression was resolute. We take this to the authorities, but we need to be ready for whatever he throws at us. The following week, Claire received a package at Haven. Inside was a single photograph of her and Ryan, taken from a distance, with the words "back off" scrawled across it in red ink. Her hands trembled as she showed it to Ryan. He's trying to scare us, Ryan said, his voice low and dangerous, but it won't work. The incident only strengthened their resolve. With Julia's help, they presented the evidence to the district attorney, who promised to launch a full investigation. But as the wheels of justice began to turn, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that Greg had one last card to play. Late one night, Claire received a call from Emily. Her sister's voice was frantic, barely above a whisper. "Claire, you need to be careful. Greg knows about the recording. He's furious." Before Claire could respond, the line went dead. As she stared at her phone, her heart pounding, Ryan entered the room. "What is it?" he asked, his eyes narrowing at the fear on her face. "It's Emily," Claire said, her voice shaking. "She's in danger." Ryan grabbed his keys. "Then we'll find her." The dawn of a new day painted San Francisco in hues of gold and gray. But for Claire and Ryan, it marked another step into uncertainty. Emily's panicked call echoed in Claire's mind as the two of them navigated the bustling city streets in Ryan's car. The normally calm and composed Claire tapped her fingers against her thigh, her anxiety barely contained. "We'll find her," Ryan reassured, his eyes flicking between the road and Claire. "Julia's tracking her location. We're not doing this blind." Claire nodded, though her chest tightened with fear. Emily's involvement had been a gamble from the start, but now it seemed the stakes were higher than anyone anticipated. Greg's retaliation wasn't just a threat. It was a reminder of his reach and ruthlessness. The first place they checked was Emily's apartment, a modest space tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. The door was slightly ajar, a detail that set Claire on edge. Ryan stepped in first, scanning the room with a sharp gaze. "Emily," Claire called, her voice echoing in the empty apartment. The living room was untouched, but a single chair had been overturned near the dining table. On the counter lay an envelope addressed to Claire. With trembling hands, she opened it to find a photograph of Emily tied to a chair, her expression defiant, despite the fear in her eyes. The note beneath it was simple: "Stay out of this, or she pays the price." Ryan clenched his fists, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "We're not letting him win." Back at Haven, Claire and Ryan gathered their closest allies. Julia arrived with her laptop, her expression grim but focused. Marcus, the manager of the soup kitchen and Claire's longtime supporter, joined them as well. Even Evelyn Callahan, Ryan's estranged mother, appeared, her resolve steely despite their complicated history. "We need to move quickly," Julia said, projecting a map onto the wall. Emily's phone pinged from an industrial warehouse on the outskirts of the city. "If Greg's keeping her anywhere, it's there." Evelyn stepped forward, her presence commanding. "What's the plan?" Ryan explained the layout Julia had mapped out and assigned roles to each of them. Marcus would keep an eye on the surrounding area, ensuring no one interrupted their efforts. Julia would handle communication and coordination from a nearby van. Claire, despite Ryan's objections, insisted on being part of the rescue team. "This isn't just about Emily," Claire argued. "This is about standing up to Greg and ending this once and for all." Before heading to the warehouse, Claire decided to rally the support of the community. She visited the soup kitchen and the local community center, sharing her story with those who had stood by her during her darkest days. "I've been where you are," Claire said, addressing a crowd of volunteers and patrons. "I've faced betrayal, loss, and fear. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're stronger together. Greg Thornton has taken too much from too many people. It's time we stop him." The crowd responded with a mix of cheers and quiet determination. Many of them offered to help, forming a network of watchful eyes and willing hands to assist during the operation. Claire's speech reignited the spirit of unity that had always defined the community she cherished. As night fell, the team arrived near the warehouse, its imposing structure illuminated by sporadic streetlights. The plan was simple: Julia would monitor Greg's movements through the building's security system, while Claire and Ryan would search for Emily. The inside of the warehouse was a labyrinth of crates and machinery, the air thick with the scent of rust and oil. Ryan led the way, his steps careful but purposeful. Claire followed closely, her flashlight casting long shadows across the walls. Through Julia's earpiece, Ryan heard her calm voice. "You're close. There's a room on the west side of the building. That's where she is." As they approached the room, the sound of muffled voices became clearer. Ryan motioned for Claire to stay back, but she shook her head, her resolve unwavering. Inside, they found Greg standing over Emily, his demeanor as smug as ever. "Well, if it isn't the happy couple," Greg sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone." Claire stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. "This ends tonight, Greg." Greg laughed, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. "You think you can stop me? You're out of your league, Claire. Always have been." Ryan's voice was cold as steel. "That's where you're wrong. We have enough evidence to bury you, and everyone you've worked with." Greg's confidence wavered for a moment, but he quickly masked it. "Evidence means nothing if you're too scared to use it." Before he could react, Marcus appeared in the doorway, flanked by several members of the community who had followed Claire's call to action. Their presence was a silent but powerful statement. Greg no longer had the upper hand. Surrounded and outnumbered, Greg's bravado crumbled. He ordered his men to stand down, but not before one of them attempted to grab Claire. Ryan intervened, subduing the man with a swift move learned from his years of self-defense training. With Emily freed and Greg restrained, Julia contacted the authorities. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air as police cars surrounded the warehouse. Officers entered the building, taking Greg and his associates into custody. As they were led away in handcuffs, Greg's eyes locked onto Claire. "This isn't over," he snarled. Claire's response was calm and resolute. "Oh, it is." The community members who had rallied to support Claire and Ryan cheered as the police vans drove away. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to the power of unity in the face of adversity. Back at Haven, the team celebrated their victory. Emily, though shaken, expressed her gratitude to Claire. "You didn't have to risk everything for me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Claire smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "You're my sister. I would have done it for anyone, but especially for you." Ryan wrapped an arm around Claire, his pride evident. "You did it. You stood up to him and won." Claire shook her head. "We did it. Together." As the night wound down, Julia pulled Claire aside. "There's something you need to see," she said, handing Claire a file. Inside were documents suggesting that Greg's network extended beyond anything they had imagined. It wasn't just about fraudulent business deals. It was about systemic corruption that reached into the highest levels of power. Claire's hand trembled as she closed the file. "This fight isn't over, is it?" Julia's expression was grave. "Not even close." The courtroom was a cold, imposing place, its silence broken only by the shuffle of papers and the murmurs of anxious spectators. Claire sat at the plaintiff's table, her fingers gripping the edge of the polished wood. Beside her was Ryan, his presence a silent pillar of strength. Across the aisle, Greg Thornton leaned back in his chair, his expression smug, as though the proceedings were little more than an inconvenience. The judge entered, a gavel struck, and the trial began. Claire's attorney, a sharp and seasoned litigator named Elena Carter, rose first. Her voice was clear and commanding, cutting through the tension in the room. "Your Honor, members of the jury, Today we bring forth evidence of a calculated malicious scheme by the defendant, Greg Thornton, to defraud my client and destroy her livelihood. This is a case of betrayal, corruption, and the fight for justice. We will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Claire Evans has suffered not only financial loss, but irreparable personal harm. Greg's lawyer, Alan Morgan, was equally formidable. He stood, adjusting his pristine tie, and began his rebuttal with a veneer of professionalism that barely concealed his condescension. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a tale of resentment and misplaced blame. My client, a respected businessman, has been dragged into this courtroom by baseless accusations. The evidence presented will show this case for what it truly is: a desperate attempt to shift responsibility for past failures. Claire's jaw tightened, but Ryan leaned close, whispering, "Stay strong. We've got this." Over the next several days, Ilana meticulously laid out the case against Greg. Documents proving financial manipulation were presented, each piece painting a picture of a man who had used his power to exploit others for personal gain. The pivotal moment came when Julia Marlowe, the private investigator, took the stand. Julia's testimony was damning. She detailed the steps she had taken to uncover Greg's fraudulent activities, including intercepted emails, hidden bank accounts, and even recorded conversations. Mr. Thornton knew exactly what he was doing, Julia stated firmly. This wasn't negligence, it was premeditated deceit. Alan Morgan attempted to discredit Julia, pointing out her unconventional methods. But Julia held her ground, her calm demeanor underscoring her credibility. When it was Claire's turn to testify, the courtroom fell silent. She walked to the witness stand, her movements deliberate, her emotions carefully controlled. Elena guided her through the questioning, allowing Claire to share her story in her own words. "Miss Evans," Elena began, "can you describe the events that led to your business being taken from you?" Claire took a deep breath, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Greg Thornton was not just my business partner. He was someone I trusted implicitly. When he suggested expanding our restaurant, I thought it was a dream come true. I didn't realize he was forging documents and siphoning funds. By the time I found out, it was too late. I lost everything: my business, my savings, and my home." The jury watched her intently, their expressions a mix of sympathy and anger. Elena continued, "And what has been the impact on your life since then?" Claire hesitated, her composure cracking slightly. "I ended up on the streets. I lost my dignity and my hope. But the hardest part was realizing that someone I trusted had done this to me." When Alan cross-examined, he tried to paint Claire as reckless, suggesting she had been careless in managing her business. But Claire's response was measured and poignant. "I trusted someone who betrayed me," she said, her gaze unwavering. "That doesn't make me reckless, it makes me human." Greg's team fought back with every weapon in their arsenal. Alan called a parade of witnesses who painted Greg as a respectable entrepreneur, and Claire as an opportunist. They introduced misleading documents and even hinted at a scandal involving Ryan's past business dealings to muddy the waters. The courtroom was tense as Alan revealed an old lawsuit against one of Ryan's startups. Though the case had been dismissed, it suggested unethical practices. Ryan's temper flared, but Elena quickly objected. "Irrelevant and prejudicial, Your Honor." The judge agreed, striking the comment from the record. But the damage was done, and whispers rippled through the courtroom. So the tide turned on the final day of the trial, when Elena called her surprise witness, Lauren Hayes, a former associate of Greg, who had been entangled in his schemes. Under oath, Lauren revealed Greg's long history of corruption, providing key documents that corroborated Julia's findings. "Why are you coming forward now?" Ilona asked. Lauren's voice was soft but resolute. "Because I'm tired of living with the guilt. Greg didn't just hurt Claire. He hurt countless others. It's time the truth came out." The final blow came when Julia played an audio recording of Greg admitting to his crimes during a meeting with one of his accomplices. The recording was clear and irrefutable, silencing any remaining doubt in the room. In her closing statement, Elena addressed the jury with heartfelt conviction. "This case isn't just about Claire Evans. It's about holding people like Greg Thornton accountable. It's about ensuring that trust is not exploited, that power is not abused. Claire Evans deserves justice, and I trust that you will deliver it." Alan's final argument was desperate, filled with empty rhetoric and character attacks. The contrast was stark, and the jury's expressions suggested they saw through his tactics. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. The courtroom was silent as the foreperson stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg Thornton, guilty of fraud, embezzlement, and breach of contract." Relief flooded through Claire as the judge pronounced Greg's sentence, several years in prison and a mandate to repay damages. Greg's face twisted with anger, but Claire felt only peace. As they left the courthouse, Claire was surrounded by supporters from the community, their cheers a testament to the impact of her fight. Emily hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," Emily whispered. "You showed them who you are." Ryan stood beside Claire, his pride evident. "This is just the beginning," he said. "Now, it's time to rebuild." Later that evening, as Claire sifted through documents at Haven, she found an envelope addressed to her. Inside was a note, written in an unfamiliar hand. "Congratulations on your victory. But you've made powerful enemies. Be careful." Claire's heart raced as she showed the note to Ryan. "What does this mean?" Ryan's expression darkened. "It means this fight isn't over. With Greg behind bars, but a larger conspiracy hinted at, Claire and Ryan's battle for justice has only just begun. If you're ready, I'll proceed to Chapter 12, Victory and Vindication." The courtroom battle had ended, and justice had prevailed. But the reverberations of the verdict were just beginning to ripple through the lives of everyone involved. Claire stood on the courthouse steps, the brisk autumn air tugging at her coat. Around her, reporters shouted questions, their cameras clicking relentlessly. But Claire's focus was elsewhere, on the faces of the community members who had gathered to support her, their cheers of triumph resonating like music to her ears. Ryan reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You did it," he said, his voice low but filled with pride. "No," Claire replied, her eyes scanning the crowd. "We did it." That evening, Ryan organized a small gathering at Haven, Claire's soon-to-reopen restaurant. The space had been transformed into a cozy haven of twinkling lights and warm laughter. Marcus, Emily, and even Julia Marlowe joined the celebration, their shared sense of victory bringing them closer. Claire raised a glass, her voice steady despite the overwhelming emotion. "This isn't just a win for me. It's for everyone who's ever felt powerless, betrayed, or forgotten. Thank you all for standing with me." The room erupted into applause, but Ryan's gaze remained fixed on Claire, his admiration evident. The days following the trial were a whirlwind. Claire's name was splashed across headlines, but for once, the coverage was positive. News outlets hailed her as a symbol of resilience, and her story inspired countless others to come forward with their own battles against corruption and injustice. Ryan's company experienced an unexpected boost in support. Investors who had been wary during the trial now reached out, praising his integrity and standing by his decision to support Claire. Evelyn, Ryan's mother, paid an unexpected visit to Haven. She entered the restaurant cautiously, her sharp gaze softening as she watched Claire work with the staff. "Claire," Evelyn began, her tone uncharacteristically hesitant. "I owe you an apology. I misjudged you." Claire set down the menu she had been reviewing, meeting Evelyn's gaze with a mix of surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, Evelyn. That means a lot." Evelyn nodded, a faint smile appearing. "I see now what Ryan sees in you: strength, determination, and heart. Don't let anyone take that away." With Greg behind bars, Claire was finally free to rebuild the life he had tried to destroy. She threw herself into the reopening of Haven, determined to make it more than just a restaurant. This time, it would serve as a community hub, offering cooking classes, mentorship programs, and a safe space for those in need. The grand reopening was a testament to her perseverance. The restaurant was packed with supporters, from loyal customers to new faces drawn by her story. As Claire stood at the entrance, welcoming guests, a familiar figure approached. It was Michael, Ryan's estranged brother. His expression was warm, his presence a surprising but welcome addition. "I couldn't miss this," Michael said, extending a hand. "Ryan told me what you've been through. You're incredible." "Thank you," Claire replied, touched by his sincerity. "And thank you for being here." As the evening unfolded, Claire took a moment to step outside, needing a breath of fresh air. She leaned against the railing, looking up at the stars, when Ryan joined her. "You've created something amazing," he said, his voice filled with pride. Claire turned to him, her eyes shining. "I couldn't have done it without you." Ryan reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Claire's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a delicate ring that sparkled in the moonlight. "Claire Evans," he began, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling within him. "You've faced more challenges than anyone should ever have to, and you've come through stronger and more beautiful than ever. I don't just want to stand by you. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Claire's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Ryan. 1,000 times. Yes." The news of their engagement spread quickly, adding to the wave of positive coverage surrounding Claire and Ryan. They became a beacon of hope, their story proving that even the most shattered lives could be rebuilt with love, determination, and support. Claire's mentorship program gained traction, attracting attention from prominent figures in the culinary world. Donations poured in, allowing her to expand the program to other cities. One day, as she reviewed plans for the expansion, Claire received a letter from an anonymous donor pledging a significant amount to her program. The note read, "Your story has inspired me to believe in second chances. Use this to help others find theirs." Amid the flurry of success, Claire found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Late one night, she sat at her desk, pen in hand, and wrote a letter to her late father. "I hope you can see me now. I've finally found my way back to the dreams we built together. Haven is open again, but it's so much more than a restaurant now. It's a place where people can find hope, just like you always wanted. I wish you could be here to see it, to meet the people who've become my family. Ryan especially. He's everything you would have hoped for me and more. He's taught me to believe in myself again, to see the strength you always knew I had. This isn't just my victory, Dad. It's ours. And I promise to keep your legacy alive in everything I do. Love, always, Claire." She folded the letter and placed it in a small wooden box, her heart lighter than it had been in years. As Claire prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a text from Julia. The message was cryptic but urgent. "We need to talk. I've found something you won't believe." Claire stared at the screen, a knot forming in her stomach. The fight with Greg was over, but it seemed another battle was just beginning. The morning light streamed through the windows of Haven, now buzzing with activity as it reopened with renewed purpose. For Claire, this day marked not just the rebirth of her restaurant, but a turning point in her life. She stood in the kitchen, her chef's coat and freshly pressed, surveying the team she had assembled. Each person in her crew represented a story of resilience. From Marcus, who had left his role at the soup kitchen to manage Haven's operations, to Sarah, a young culinary student who had once been homeless herself. "Today isn't just about food," Claire said to the team during their morning briefing. "It's about creating a space where people feel seen, valued, and inspired. Let's make it count." The team cheered, their energy palpable. Marcus clapped Claire on the back, grinning. "If anyone can pull this off, it's you." The grand reopening attracted more than just the usual crowd. Local reporters mingled with loyal patrons, curious newcomers, and a few high-profile figures who had been drawn by Claire's inspiring story. Among them was Evelyn, Ryan's mother, who had begun to soften her once critical stance toward Claire. "I have to admit," Evelyn said, as she greeted Claire at the entrance, "this place is impressive, and so are you." Claire smiled, a mix of gratitude and pride in her expression. "Thank you, Evelyn. That means a lot." As the evening unfolded, the restaurant buzzed with activity. Claire moved seamlessly between the kitchen and the dining area, checking on guests and ensuring everything ran smoothly. At one point, she paused to watch a table of young children, laughing with their parents, a reminder of the warmth and connection she had hoped to create. Toward the end of the night, Ryan stepped onto the small stage in the corner of the restaurant. The chatter in the room quieted as he tapped the microphone. "I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began. "This restaurant isn't just a place to eat. It's a testament to resilience, community, and the incredible woman who brought it all to life." He gestured for Claire to join him on stage. As she stepped up, the room erupted into applause. Ryan reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Claire's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a stunning ring. "Claire Evans," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You've shown me what it means to fight for what matters, to believe in second chances, and to love without limits. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Ryan. Absolutely yes." The crowd cheered as Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into an embrace. For Claire, the moment felt surreal, a culmination of everything she had fought for, and a promise of the future too she never thought possible. The next morning, Claire sat in her office at Haven, going over plans to expand the restaurant's community programs. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Julia Marlowe, the private investigator who had been instrumental in exposing Greg's crimes. "You've been busy," Julia said, glancing around the bustling restaurant. Claire smiled. "It's been a whirlwind, but a good one. What brings you here?" Julia's expression turned serious as she placed a folder on Claire's desk. "I've been digging into some loose ends from Greg's case. There's something you need to see." Claire opened the folder, her brow furrowing as she scanned the contents. Among the documents was a series of financial transactions linking Greg to Lauren Hayes, the rival CEO who had tried to discredit Ryan. This can't be real," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is," Julia replied. "Lauren didn't just try to ruin Ryan's reputation. She actively funded Greg's schemes to take you down." Claire and Ryan confronted Lauren at a high-profile networking event later that week. The tension was palpable as they approached her, Julia's evidence in hand. "Lauren," Ryan began, his tone sharp. "Care to explain these?" Lauren's confident demeanor faltered as she glanced at the documents. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You funded Greg," Claire said, her voice steady but cold. "You tried to destroy us both." Lauren scoffed, attempting to regain her composure. "You have no proof." Julia stepped forward. "Actually, we have plenty. Enough to ruin you in court and the press." For a moment, Lauren's mask slipped, revealing a flash of panic. Then she turned on her heel and walked away. But the damage was done. The confrontation solidified Claire and Ryan's resolve to fight against corruption, no matter the cost. Amid the turmoil, Claire received an unexpected message from her estranged sister, Emily. The two had drifted apart after their father's death, but Emily's note hinted at a desire to reconnect. "Do you think it's worth it?" Claire asked Ryan as they sat together in their living room. Ryan took her hand. "Only you can decide that. But from what you've told me, I think she wants to make amends." The sisters met at a quiet cafe a few days later. The conversation was tentative at first, filled with awkward pauses and long silences. But as they talked, years of hurt began to fade. "I've missed you," Emily admitted, her voice breaking. "I've wanted to reach out for so long, but I didn't know how." Claire reached across the table, taking her sister's hand. "I've missed you too. Let's not waste any more time." As the weeks went on, Claire's vision for Haven expanded. She launched a mentorship program for underserved youth, teaching them culinary skills and providing a path to stable careers. The program attracted attention from national media, further cementing Haven's status as a beacon of hope. One evening, as Claire and Ryan reviewed plans for the program, Ryan suggested an idea. "What if we started a foundation? Something that combines your passion for food and my resources to make a bigger impact." Claire's eyes lit up. "You mean, like the Sinclair Evans Foundation?" Ryan grinned. "Exactly." The idea quickly took shape, and the foundation's launch became a focal point of their shared mission. Through it, they aimed to replicate Heaven's model in underserved communities across the country, creating spaces where people could rebuild their lives. Late one night, as Claire prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a message from Julia. "There's more to Lauren's involvement than we realized. Call me ASAP." Claire stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Just when she thought the fight was over, it seemed another battle was on the horizon. The sun rose over San Francisco, casting a golden hue across the city as Claire stood on the balcony of Haven. The restaurant's success had exceeded her wildest dreams, but the weight of Julia's cryptic message from the previous night lingered in her mind. Ryan joined her, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. "You didn't sleep much," he noted, handing her the cup. "Julia found something," Claire said, her voice tinged with unease. "She says there's more to Lauren's connection with Greg." Ryan frowned, his protective instincts immediately surfacing. "We've already exposed Greg. What else could she be hiding?" Claire shook her head. "I don't know, but I'm meeting Julia this morning." Julia met Claire at a quiet cafe, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a somber expression. She slid a folder across the table, her voice low. "Lauren didn't just fund Greg. She's been running a shadow operation, targeting small businesses and individuals she sees as threats." Claire's brow furrowed as she skimmed through the documents. They detailed a series of fraudulent activities, all orchestrated by Lauren Hayes, aimed at consolidating her power in the corporate world. "She used Greg to ruin your reputation and gain leverage over Ryan's company, Julia explained. And she's been doing this to others for years. Claire's hands trembled as she processed the information. How do we stop her? You've already started, Julia said. But if you want to bring her down completely, it's going to take more than just a courtroom. Ryan and Claire decided to go public with the revelations. They arranged a press conference at Haven, inviting journalists, community leaders, and even former victims of Lauren's schemes. The event was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Ryan took the stage first. Today, we're not just sharing our story. We're exposing a system of corruption that preys on the vulnerable. He gestured for Claire to join him. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the cameras flashing. This isn't just about me or Ryan. It's about standing up to those who believe they can destroy others without consequence. We won't be silent. Their speech was met with applause, but the battle was far from over. Lauren responded swiftly, issuing a statement denying the allegations and accusing Ryan and Claire of orchestrating a smear campaign. She's doubling down, Marcus said, as he joined Claire and Ryan in their office. What's the plan? Claire looked at Ryan, her determination unwavering. We keep fighting. Amid the escalating tension, Claire was invited to speak at a TED conference. The theme of the event was resilience, and Claire's story was the perfect fit. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to bare her soul to the world. But Ryan encouraged her. Your story can inspire people, he said. It already has. The auditorium was packed on the day of her talk. As Claire stepped onto the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. She took a deep breath and began. There was a time when I thought my life was over, she said. I lost everything, my career, my home, my sense of self. But in that darkness, I found something I never expected, hope. She recounted her journey, from the betrayal that left her homeless to the community that helped her rebuild. Her voice faltered as she described the pain of her past, but she pressed on. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about finding the strength to stand up again and again, no matter how many times life knocks you down. The audience rose to their feet as she finished, their applause thunderous. Claire's talk quickly went viral, sparking conversations about systemic inequality and the power of community. Inspired by her own story of resilience, Ryan decided to reach out to his foster siblings. It had been years since he'd seen them, and the wounds of their shared past were still raw. He invited them to a private dinner at Haven, hoping to mend the fractured relationships. Claire supported him every step of the way. Family is complicated, she said, but it's worth trying. The dinner was tense at first, the silence heavy with unspoken words. But as the evening went on, memories of their childhood began to surface. Laughter replaced the tension, and by the end of the night, Ryan felt a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible. Amid their victories, an unexpected development arose. The Sinclair Evans Foundation received a pledge of $10 million from an anonymous donor. The catch? The money came with conditions. The foundation would have to focus exclusively on homelessness, abandoning its other initiatives. This feels off, Claire said, as she read the donor's letter. Why would someone want to limit what we're doing? Ryan nodded. It's a lot of money, but it doesn't sit right with me. After much deliberation, they decided to decline the donation. We can't compromise our mission, Claire said. Not for any amount of money. Their decision was met with mixed reactions, but it reaffirmed their commitment to integrity and their vision for the foundation. With the help of Julia and their growing network of supporters, Claire and Ryan launched a comprehensive campaign against Lauren Hayes. They worked tirelessly to gather testimonies from her victims, uncovering more evidence of her corruption. The campaign gained traction, with media outlets picking up the story and public opinion shifting in their favor. Lauren's empire began to crumble under the weight of the allegations, and she faced mounting pressure from both the legal system and her own board. As the battle against Lauren reached its peak, Claire received an email from a young woman who had watched her TED Talk. The woman, a struggling artist, wrote about how Claire's story had inspired her to keep going, despite her own challenges. Reading the email brought tears to Claire's eyes. She shared it with Ryan, who smiled. "This is why we do what we do." One evening, as Claire and Ryan celebrated their victories at Haven, a shadowy figure approached their table. It was a former associate of Lauren's, someone they had never expected to see. "I have information you'll want to hear," the person said, their voice low. "But it comes at a price." Claire and Ryan exchanged a glance, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Just when they thought the fight was over, a new challenge had emerged. The courtroom was quieter than usual, the air thick with anticipation. Greg Thornton's conviction had been a triumph for Claire and Ryan, but the battle with Lauren Hayes had shifted the focus. As Claire sat beside Ryan in their foundation office, the weight of their journey bore heavily on her. They had achieved so much, but the scars from their fight against corruption were still fresh. Amidst the chaos of legal battles and public scrutiny, Claire and Ryan found solace in their growing family. They had finalized the adoption of a 4-year-old boy, Liam, a spirited child with an infectious laugh. Watching Liam play in their sunlit backyard reminded Claire of the importance of the life they were building. "Do you think we're doing enough for him?" Claire asked one evening as they tucked Liam into bed. Ryan squeezed her hand. "We're giving him what neither of us had: a stable home and unconditional love. That's more than enough." The Sinclair Evans Foundation had become a national symbol of resilience and hope. Its programs spanned from community housing projects to mentorship initiatives for young entrepreneurs. Claire and Ryan's story continued to inspire donations and partnerships, allowing them to expand their reach. At a board meeting, Claire outlined her latest vision: a nationwide network of culinary schools aimed at giving homeless individuals a chance to rebuild their lives through cooking. "This isn't just about skills," Claire said, her voice steady. "It's about restoring dignity and purpose." The board erupted in applause, and Ryan couldn't help but beam with pride. Claire's passion and determination were contagious. While the foundation thrived, challenges persisted. Public opinion remained divided, with critics accusing Ryan of using their story to boost his company's image. Headlines like "Tech Tycoon's Charity, Genuine or PR Stunt" surfaced, creating tension within their team. "Why do they always assume the worst?" Claire asked one evening, frustration evident in her voice. Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Because it's easier to doubt than to believe. But we know the truth, and so do the people we've helped." Liam became an unexpected source of inspiration for Claire and Ryan. His innocent questions about their work often reminded them of why they started. "Why do people live on the streets, Mommy?" Liam asked one day as they drove through the city. Claire took a deep breath, her heart aching at the simplicity of his question. "Sometimes life gets really hard for people, and they don't have anyone to help them." Liam's eyes widened with determination. "But we can help them, right?" Claire smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's exactly what we're trying to do." To celebrate the Foundation's 5th anniversary, Claire and Ryan organized a community festival at one of their housing complexes. The event was filled with music, food, and laughter. Former residents of the Foundation's programs shared their success stories, creating a sense of hope and unity. One woman, Maria, stood on stage with her 2 children. I was homeless and hopeless when I found this foundation. Now I have a job, a home, and a future for my kids. Thank you for believing in me. Claire wiped away tears as Maria hugged her. Moments like these reminded her that their work was worth every struggle. As the festival wound down, Claire received a letter from an unexpected source, Lauren Hayes. The envelope was unmarked, but the handwriting was unmistakable. I underestimated you, the letter read. But the fight isn't over. Watch your back. Claire showed the letter to Ryan, her hands trembling. Do you think she's planning something? Ryan's jaw tightened. Let her try. We've come too far to let fear stop us now. Despite the looming threat, Claire poured herself into the culinary school project. The first location opened in their hometown, and the response was overwhelming. Classes filled up quickly, and the students' gratitude was palpable. One young man, Tyler, shared his story during the opening ceremony. I never thought I'd have a second chance, but this place has given me hope. Thank you for believing in us. As Claire watched Tyler's speech, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was her legacy, a legacy of love, resilience, and second chances. Meanwhile, Ryan reconnected with his foster siblings, inviting them to visit the foundation. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with both laughter and tears. They reminisced about their shared struggles and celebrated how far they had come. I never thought we'd end up here, Ryan's sister Maggie said, as they toured the foundation. You've built something incredible. Ryan smiled, his heart full. We did this together, Maggie. Every step of the way. Lauren Hayes' threats came to a head during a high-profile charity event. She made a surprise appearance, her presence turning heads. She approached Claire with a smug smile. Enjoying your moment in the spotlight? Lauren asked. Claire didn't flinch. This isn't about the spotlight. It's about making a difference. Lauren leaned in, her voice low. Let's see how long your fairy tale lasts. Ryan stepped in, his protective instincts kicking in. Stay away from my wife. Lauren smirked, but walked away, leaving behind a sense of unease. Claire and Ryan knew they hadn't seen the last of her. Back at home, the tension of the evening melted away as Claire and Ryan sat on their porch, watching Liam play with their dog. The stars twinkled above, and the sounds of laughter filled the air. Do you think we'll ever truly escape people like Lauren? Claire asked softly. Ryan wrapped an arm around her. Maybe not, but as long as we have each other, we can face anything. Years later, the Sinclair Evans Foundation had expanded internationally, touching countless lives. Claire and Ryan continued to work tirelessly, but they always made time for their family. During a family picnic, Liam, now a teenager, asked, "What's the most important thing you've learned?" Claire smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. That love and kindness can change the world. Ryan nodded, his gaze fixed on their children. And that no matter how dark things get, there's always hope. As they watched their children chase each other through the park, Claire and Ryan felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Their journey had been filled with challenges, but it had also been a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of those who refused to give up. Their legacy wasn't just in the foundation they had built. It was in the lives they had touched and the love they had shared. As the screen fades to black, imagine the echoes of Claire and Ryan's journey, a tale of resilience, love, and the unshakable belief that second chances can lead to extraordinary beginnings. What part of their story moved you the most? Was it Claire's fight to reclaim her dignity, Ryan's unwavering support, or the strength they found in each other? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what moments touched your heart and how their story inspired you. If this journey stirred something within you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's so much more to come. Stories of courage, redemption, and the power of the human spirit. Together, let's keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with another unforgettable chapter to you of hope and transformation. Star.